About a year ago, I made a video titled Why New World PvP is Failing. It made its rounds, and a short while after that, the game actually started showing signs of improving. The hopium was back, and then it wasn't. And now we're at a point of no return. New World PvP has failed. I've been seeing a ton of videos on why New World as a whole is dying or is already dead, and while I feel like they hit the nail on the head, they're missing a key part in all of this: the PvPer's perspective. This is going to sound a little controversial, but for the longest time, PvP was the one thing keeping the New World community alive. To the mainstream audience, obviously the game was dead, but just like every niche PvP MMO out there, it had a small loyal audience, rivaling even BDO and Guild Wars 2. The game felt alive, and that's all that really matters, right? Arena queues popped in seconds, open world PvP was happening in every zone, dozens of OPR matches were happening at the same time. People were for the most part enjoying their time PvPing. These people are what I call dreamers. They continued playing New World because they were having fun, but they also believed the game could be more fun and had the potential to be bigger than what it currently was. They had a vision for New World, a vision that, dare I say, was bigger than AGS's vision for the entire game. And rightfully so, honestly. Obviously there was issues, but the game was overall improving. Every single update they were taking one step back, but 2 steps forward is what I say. It was following that path up until after the Rise of the Angry Earth expansion. I'm saying after mainly because it was honestly an amazing expansion. We got mounts, and we got PvP content that worked perfectly with those mounts. We got a new weapon, and then we got numerous artifacts that nearly tripled build variety. Sure, it was a pretty small expansion, but that wasn't the main problem. It's the events after where the real problems occur. Let's start with the most apparent one: balance issues and bugs that cause balance issues. But every PvP MMO has balance issues, right? So why is New World any different? Well, the thing with New World is, when something is overpowered, it's not just overpowered for a few days like other games. It's overpowered for weeks to months. It is actually in everyone's best interest to pursue that overpowered item or build because no one really knows when it's going to get nerfed. But we all know one thing: it's going to take forever for it to get nerfed. Some people call this meta chasing and put the blame on the players, but it is entirely on the game's fault for putting people in a situation where they're forced to meta chase to enjoy the game. And before the people that don't agree with me write a paragraph in my comments, let me ask you a question. What did you do when Shirking Heals was meta and you decided not to make a Shirking Heals set because you knew it was eventually going to get nerfed? You played the game less, didn't you? Because you were getting slaughtered in PvP? Or you continued playing the game and spent majority of your time complaining on Reddit, Discord, and YouTube comment sections. You were not having fun. Then what happened when Shirking Heals got nerfed? I went from 1v10ing to 1v5ing you guys. Then what happened when Shirking Heals got nerfed again? Oh no, I went from 1v5ing to 1v4ing you guys. At this point, a lot of you probably made a Shirking Heals set, didn't you? And then what happened? Shirking Heals got nerfed again. And at this point, it stopped being meta and everyone started making new builds. You basically felt like you wasted your time and money, but you also wasted the experience. You never got to fully enjoy it like everyone else, but you also suffered the entire way through, and now you're making another build and going to go through the same exact cycle again and again. Or, the more plausible situation, you simply stopped playing the game somewhere in that cycle. And the best part is, this could have all been avoided if Shirking Heals was properly nerfed the first week of the expansion. This isn't just about Shirking Heals though. This happens every single season with multiple different items, builds, and weapons. Stuff is continuously overpowered for too long and then overly nerfed, or vice versa, where something is continuously weak for too long and then it's overly buffed. I get that an MMO should shake up its meta every now and then, but when the process to get new gear in this game is not fun at all, that the frequency of nerfing and buffing stuff shouldn't be this often. You pretty much have two choices when developing and balancing an MMO. You either have an easy gearing process and then shake up the meta often, or you have a difficult process and then you're very careful on the effects that the buffs, nerfs, and releases will have on the population. Because there's a big difference between nerfing something that takes 2 hours to replace versus nerfing something that takes days or even weeks to replace. The latter burns out your entire community, and that's exactly what happened repeatedly after this expansion. Some of you aren't gonna like this, but New World is the #1 example on why you should never let your public community dictate balance decisions. You create an environment where players are motivated to whine and complain about things they personally don't like because it's been proven to work and now it's actually in their best interest to do it. And so then they form these little echo chambers, and then it makes you think that these echo chamber opinions are everyone's opinions. It's just flawed from the top to the bottom, and the devs can't tell which one is which. I'm not saying you should never listen to your community. You can clearly tell when the majority of the community doesn't want something, and you should take action fast against that. I can only think of one good example of this, and it was when auto potions were in PTR. They were in PTR twice actually, but both times they received nearly unanimous negative feedback. They never hit the live version. That's how things should always be. But that's rare. Most of the time there's a clear division in the community over a certain change. You see disagreements and arguments everywhere. That's when you take a step back and just ignore your public community, honestly. There's no way to guarantee that the people you're reading feedback from aren't biased. Half the time, they themselves don't even realize they're biased. They could have a bad build, they could have slow reflexes, they could have a complete lack of game knowledge. They could just straight up be trolling too. Basically, nothing they say is credible. You have to privately take feedback from a wide variety of PvPers you know are skilled and knowledgeable about the game. And even those people will be slightly biased, I admit, but you know what? Their biased feedback is much more credible and reliable than a random person's biased feedback. You filter out 99% of the trash feedback this way. So just shifting back to the gear discussion, let's also talk about how bad the new PvP player experience is in New World. You know how much it hurts to tell new players in my comments that the only way to get gear like me is to either buy it straight from the market or level your crafting to 250 and craft it yourself. Or I guess you can pay someone else to craft it for you, but we won't get into that. Regardless, you know what these all have in common? They all cost a shit ton of money. Just one is more worth it in the long run than the other. Doesn't make it any better. I'd rather grind mobs in circles for 8 hours a day in BDO than grind for money in New World, and that says a lot. It also doesn't help that the crafting UI in this game has over 100 different menus and variations. Some are even hidden for quite literally no reason. There should not be guides out there on how to navigate a crafting menu. There should only be 3 menus: light, medium, and heavy. Every other option should just be inside one singular menu. Okay, wait. Let's also rewind back the builds. The original idea of artifacts were great. They were unique effects that completely changed your playstyle. You know, iframe on weapon swap gloves, javelin pulling instead of pushing, a giant shield that doesn't let you dodge, a great axe that does magic damage, and a void gauntlet that does physical damage. These are cool and interesting mechanics. Nowadays, the majority of artifacts are what I call stat sticks. They don't change gameplay at all besides giving you some kind of DPS boost or some kind of defensive boost. And these stat stick artifacts are added like they're new content. The devs have been acting like this is some sort of cheat code to keep your player base engaged indefinitely, but in actuality, it's all the same stuff but with different numbers. Anyways, let's dive a little deeper into some fundamental problems with the game. The obvious one clearly being the ways that the servers are designed. I'll show you guys actually. This server is dead. 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 these two are like half dead. Half the servers in this game are dead or dying. If a returning player ever logs into one of these servers, they're gonna log right back out. No one is gonna return to the game and drop 15 bucks to go to a different server. The fact that they returned in the first place is already a miracle in itself. How much better would it have been if, instead of adding all this cross-server functionality, which I must mention is pointless on dead regions like West when there's only one server. Imagine they instead let us transfer servers for free with no cooldown. Oh, but Deity, how are they gonna make money off of server transfers? Dude, they literally made the entire game cross-server. They're working against their own monetization regardless. But yeah, pretty much copy and paste the entire channel system from BDO that lets you freely switch between servers whenever you want. Also, geez, how many times have I mentioned BDO by now? Can you imagine that a pay-to-win Korean MMO has more innovation than fucking Amazon? And I quit BDO a long time ago, and I'll never play that game again. But you can't deny that the New World devs straight up got skill issued by BDO devs, even though it came out half a decade later. I remember I had a 1070 Ti and a 5-year-old CPU at the time, and I was getting 200 FPS in BDO Wars with over 200 players on my screen. And I wasn't even following some sort of optimization guide, I was literally playing on medium settings. I have a 4080 now, and New World barely gets 60 FPS in a 100-man war. Don't even get me started on server lag, by the way. I thought BDO had terrible desync until I played New World whenever there was more than 100 people in the same area. It is borderline unplayable. I might have to end the stream early. Dude, this is like unbearably laggy.
Over 100 ping.
Yeah, I didn't notice the ping. We're actually like, I have 140 right now, 150. Every time when you face the floor, it goes up, look. New World's servers are almost like a bottleneck to the game's potential success. No matter how good they make this game, it's gonna always feel like shit when the game is alive. My most fun times in New World PvP was when the game was half dead or dead, because the game was actually lag free. Can you imagine that? Alright, so we've gone over general balance, we've gone over gear, and we've gone over the servers. Let's get into some specifics. For a certain while, I said the game was taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, which is still progress obviously. Recently though, it feels like they're taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back. The new movement system is probably the biggest example of that. They ruined combat fluidity completely. New World combat was grounded and predictable. When players fought each other, it was almost like a dance. There was a sort of rhythm you had to keep a track of. That's all gone now. The new movement system turns this game into an arcade. Even just setting all the current bugs with it aside, the biggest problem with it is the way that your actions are now completely unpredictable. There are no more body physics. You can do a 180 attack without actually aiming, you can do circles, weird movement tech, and just a ton of goofy shit. That's the perfect way to describe it. It's goofy and cheesy. Oh, but it's optional, right? So it's fine. Even worse, dude. Now the game has to be balanced around multiple different movement options. Everyone's character behaves differently. Every single setting changes something. No one is actually using these settings because they think it's better designed. They're forced to use it because it gives an advantage in PvP. So if they stick with the old movement system, then they're essentially playing at a lower playing field than everyone else using it. I don't know what they were thinking of this. Now, this next one is probably going to be my most controversial opinion, but you know who it's going to be controversial to? The current dead player base who's been normalized to it, and the people playing these builds. Why are healers tab target in an action combat game? Just why? You know what the best healers do in this game? They raise their DPI to 6,000 and learn every movement exploit in the game. You know why they can do that and other people can't? Because they don't have to worry about aiming and the way their character is facing. The game does all that aiming for them. It does all the thinking for them. And I'm not saying they're OP. I'm saying that PvP when healers are involved is just not fun. I've done countless arenas and OPRs with just all DPS, and I'm sure you guys have too. Do you agree with me that it's more enjoyable when there's no healers at all? The second a healer gets involved, even if both teams have one, it gets boring. You basically turn off a specific portion of your brain. Or actually, I know the best way to describe it. You can lean back. I genuinely believe that if New World didn't have any healers, the game would be more fun. Oh, but the PvE is going to be too hard, right? Dude, the PvE in New World is the worst part of the game. You just sit in a sacred and spam attack the boss. And then every now and then you dodge a one-shot mechanic. I don't want to get too much into PvE, but I'll say this. Have you guys seen the co-op Elden Ring mod? Imagine if New World PvE was like this, instead of being this. Let me know if you agree with all this, by the way, because I feel like there's a huge stigma in the community where if you're caught complaining about healers, then that means you have a skill issue, which clearly isn't true because I'm saying it. But regardless, these are all pretty valid reasons I say that PvPers are leaving and they're not coming back. But there has to be more to it than this, right? Because there's always been lag, there's always been balance issues, there's always been clunky movement. Well, there's a few key factors you have to keep in mind still. New World was released during one of the biggest MMO droughts we've ever had. The only other new MMO, or I'd say big MMO release that was relevant, was Lost Ark. So if they actually made the game good in this 2 to 3 year drought, there was a very high chance it would have become a top MMO. But now, New World's time to shine is almost over. The MMO drought is about to end this year. We're going to get a lot of good releases, and we're also going to get a lot of trash releases. But you know what's interesting? People would rather play the new and popular trash game over the old and dead trash game. That's just how things work. And so the dreamers I was talking about earlier, they know this. At a certain point, an MMO runs out of second chances, and I feel like that's happened with New World already. People's eyes are on new games. The dreamers have something new to dream about. New World is unfortunately out of the picture, no matter how good it gets in the future. Their loyal audience is gone and isn't coming back. I'm going to leave this with a closing remark. New World is an MMO with bad PvE and good PvP potential. But the developers have fallen for the age-old curse of believing that there are more PvE players than PvP players, so they've completely disregarded PvP because of that. When every single MMO out right now has abysmal PvP, of course there's going to be no PvP players. The entire market is cursed. None of the MMOs out right now should be used as success stories at all. Maybe one day we'll all be playing an MMO with good PvE and good PvP, but I think it's going to be a long while.
You can make a PvP or do PvE every single day, nobody will complain. But the moment that you make a PvE or do PvP, oh dude, the game will be shut down. They are like cancel culture. Like if a PvPer needs to do PvE, they're like, oh, I had to do PvE, fine, alright, sure, let's get on with it. But if a PvEer needs to do PvP, they're like, oh, how dare you? Why are you forcing me? I come into the game to enjoy the nature.
Thank you for watching, and I'll probably see you guys in the next trash but popular MMO.